Let's be honest, those cheap blue tarps everyone swears by, they're disposable. They rip, rot, and crumble faster than a soldier's rations left in the rain. But there's an older, smarter, and far tougher alternative, one born not from plastic factories, but from the ingenuity of wartime engineers and sailors who didn't have the luxury of waste. It's called recycled waxed canvas, and if you care about gear that actually lasts, this material changes the game. This isn't nostalgia talking, this is a lesson in durability straight from the trenches of World War II, where survival often depended on the tools you could trust. Back then, throwaway wasn't part of the vocabulary. Every scrap had a second life, and canvas, once worn and weary, became something legendary. Before the plastic era turned everything shiny and synthetic, armies and tradesmen relied on a fabric known as oilcloth or waxed canvas. It started its life as humble cotton canvas, sails, tenting, or flour sacks, before being treated with linseed oil, beeswax, and resins. The result was a flexible, waterproof material that could take years of punishment without cracking or tearing. You'll find it in the stories of naval deckhands keeping supplies dry in salt storms, of engineers rigging makeshift shelters under artillery rain, and of homesteaders braving months of damp and mud. It wasn't just strong, it was self-healing. When the fibers got wet, they swelled, tightening their own weave. Water didn't seep through, it bounced off. Try that with a plastic tarp and see how long it lasts. Even better, the same piece of fabric could be repurposed countless times. When tents wore out, soldiers cut them down, re-oiled the cloth, and turned them into ground covers or ponchos. Nothing was wasted. Every inch mattered. That's not just resourcefulness, it's engineering genius born out of necessity. Let's talk science for a second, because this is where the difference really hits home. Plastic traps moisture underneath it. That's why your gear smells sour after a few days covered in it. Canvas, on the other hand, breathes. The oil fills the tiny gaps between the cotton fibers, making it waterproof, but the fabric still lets vapor escape. No rot, no mildew, no stink. When rain hits, the cotton fibers expand, closing up tighter. The wetter it gets, the more resistant it becomes. Meanwhile, plastics grow brittle, tear under stress, and disintegrate in sunlight. That's why a typical hardware store tarp lasts maybe a season or two before turning into confetti. A properly treated waxed canvas tarp, well, you're looking at 10 to 15 years, easy, and honestly, even longer if you keep up with some basic maintenance. Now, maintenance doesn't mean anything complicated, just a little reapplication of oil and wax every so often, that's all. The result is a tarp that actually gets better with age, kinda like leather or a good cast iron pan. This is where history meets hands-on. You can actually recreate this legendary fabric yourself with just some basic materials and a bit of patience. Start with old 100% cotton canvas. No synthetic blends really. It could be an old tent, a duffel bag, or even some heavy denim. Wash it in hot water to open up the fibers, then make sure to dry it completely. Now for the secret sauce, mix equal parts melted beeswax and boiled linseed oil. For about 2 square meters of fabric, you'll want a cup of each. Warm the blend until it's smooth and liquid. Then, using a brush or rag, apply it evenly to your fabric while it's still slightly warm. The heat helps the fibers absorb the mix deeply. Hang the treated fabric in a well-ventilated space for a day or two to cure. The texture will darken and develop that classic oiled canvas sheen. If it feels a little tacky, don't worry. That's part of the charm. Once it's fully set, hit it lightly with a hairdryer or low flame to smooth it out. And that's it. You've just made a tarp that can shrug off rain like it's nothing. Want to go a step further? Add a bit of pine tar to the mixture. Seafarers did this to boost UV and mold resistance, especially for gear stored outdoors. The scent alone could transport you straight back to a naval deck during a wartime storm. This isn't just about history, it's about practicality. In the field, a waxed canvas tarp makes a perfect ground sheet. It doesn't trap condensation, so your sleeping bag stays dry and comfortable. Fold it over twice, and you've got a waterproof base that won't cling or sweat like plastic. Hang it up as a lean-to, and you'll notice how quiet it is in the wind. Soldiers back in World War II appreciated that silence. It meant rest without the flapping racket that gives away your position or ruins your sleep. Gardeners use smaller pieces as compost covers. Farmers lay them over tools or hay bales. Even off-grid builders rely on them for outdoor storage because they don't shred under sun or strain. And in emergencies, this fabric turns into whatever you need it to be. A stretcher, a poncho, a pack wrap, or a shelter. If it tears, heat the spot gently, press on more waxed cloth, and it bonds right back. Try that repair trick with polyethylene. Good luck. There's a reason modern preppers, craftsmen, and eco-builders are reviving this lost technique. In a world drowning in plastic waste and unstable supply chains, the old canvas methods are a return to independence. You don't need a factory, you need skill, patience, and a respect for materials. Waxed canvas is biodegradable, sustainable, and infinitely repairable. It represents an attitude that defined generations who built things to last, from trench engineers in World War II to Arctic explorers testing the limits of endurance. This material carried humanity through its harshest conditions, and it's ready to do it again. The truth is, our ancestors didn't have better technology, they had better understanding. They knew how to turn waste into resilience, and that's a lesson worth relearning. So, next time you reach for another flimsy plastic tarp, just stop for a moment. You're buying something temporary. Instead, build something timeless. Reclaim that heritage of craftsmanship, a tarp that strengthens with age, that weathers storms instead of surrendering to them. That's not just gear, that's history you can hold in your hands. If you're passionate about rediscovering materials that once defined survival, craftsmanship, and self-reliance, go ahead and subscribe to HistoryHQ. We dive deep into forgotten wartime innovations and the gear that truly stood the test of time. Share this with a fellow history buff or survivalist, and let's keep real durability alive, one story at a time.